My name's Jane Kilcher, and I'm working with Emily Rydell on her dredge up in Nome. I love being on the dredge, and we're getting gold. I'll definitely have gold fever.
For years, fans of Alaska, The Last Frontier, have followed Jane Kilcher and Atsley Kilcher as one of the show's most talked about couples. But behind the scenes, quiet changes and unanswered questions have kept rumors alive for a long time. Now, Jane has finally spoken out, and what she confirms is something many viewers didn't expect to hear out loud. Join us as we break down what Jane really revealed, what led to this moment, and why fans are reacting so strongly. 2 lives before the camera. Before their lives were ever shaped by cameras and public attention, Jane Kilcher and Atsley Kilcher lived very different paths in Alaska. Both came from the same rugged environment, but their early lives developed in separate directions, shaped by experience, responsibility, and personal struggle, rather than any shared story. Jane Kilcher grew up in Homer, Alaska, a small coastal town where daily life is closely tied to nature and survival skills matter just as much as formal education. She did not grow up on the Kilcher homestead, and she was not raised in a reality TV environment or anything close to it. Her early adult life was focused on practical work and service. She trained and worked as a registered nurse, a job that required patience, emotional strength, and the ability to stay calm in serious situations. Atsley Kilcher's upbringing was very different, even though it was in the same region of Alaska. He was raised on the Kilcher homestead, a place known for its survivalist lifestyle and self-sufficient way of living. His family, led by strong traditional values, focused on hunting, farming, building, and living off the land. From a young age, Atsley learned that comfort was not guaranteed and that hard work was a daily requirement, not an option. His father, At Sr., played a major role in teaching him these values, making sure he understood how to survive in remote conditions. Before they reconnected, both Jane and Atsley had already lived full lives on their own. They had experienced relationships, personal challenges, and moments of uncertainty that shaped who they were as adults. Neither of them was looking for something dramatic or life-changing when they crossed paths again. By that point, both had learned to be careful with emotions and slow with trust. They were not inexperienced or naive. Instead, they were people who understood responsibility and the weight of real-life struggles. When they met again in Alaska, the connection did not happen in a sudden or emotional way. It was gradual. There was no big moment or dramatic turning point. Instead, it was a slow recognition between 2 people who understood similar challenges in life. They both knew what it meant to work hard, to live in difficult conditions, and to deal with uncertainty without falling apart. That shared understanding became the foundation of their connection. Neither of them rushed into commitment. They took their time, observing how they worked together in daily life situations. Whether it was handling responsibilities, dealing with the environment, or managing personal space, they paid attention to how naturally things fit. There was no pressure to perform or impress. Instead, there was mutual respect and a steady, grounded way of building trust. And just as their connection began to settle into something real and lasting, life in Alaska was already preparing new challenges they could not predict. A family in the wilderness. When Jane Kilcher entered the Kilcher world, she was stepping into a life she had not been raised in. Even though she grew up in Alaska, the Kilcher homestead lifestyle was very different from anything she had experienced before. It was not just about living in a rural place. It was about full self-sufficiency, where daily survival depended on physical strength, planning, and constant effort. Jane had practical skills from her work as a nurse and commercial fisher, but joining a multi-generational homestead added a new layer of responsibility and expectation. Atsley Kilcher already had experience with fatherhood when they came together. He had a son, Etienne, from a previous relationship. Jane also had a daughter, Piper, from her earlier life. When the 2 of them formed a relationship, it was not just about building a life together as a couple. It was about merging 2 separate families with different backgrounds, habits, and emotional needs. This is already a complex process in normal settings, but in their case, it happened in an isolated environment where outside help was limited. Blending families in the wilderness comes with challenges that are both emotional and practical. Children need stability, routine, and attention, while adults are constantly managing physical survival tasks. Jane had to adjust quickly to being part of a larger family system, while also making sure her own daughter felt safe and included. At the same time, she had to build a relationship with Lee's son, who also had his own adjustments to make. There was no easy separation between personal life and daily survival. Everything happened in the same space, at the same time, without much privacy or downtime. Daily life on the homestead required constant effort. Fishing was not just a job, it was food supply. Hauling water was not optional, it was necessary for survival. Maintaining shelter meant repairing structures, preparing for storms, and making sure the home could withstand harsh weather. Seasonal preparation added even more pressure, especially before winter, when food storage, firewood collection, and equipment checks had to be completed in time. These tasks were physically demanding and could not be delayed or ignored. In the middle of all this work, an emotional imbalance slowly began to form. Even before any public attention or fame, the responsibilities were not always shared evenly in terms of emotional support and presence. Jane often found herself taking on multiple roles at once. She was a mother, a worker, and also the emotional stabilizer of the household. This meant she was not only handling physical tasks, but also keeping the family connected and functioning emotionally. Jane's role as a stabilizer became more visible over time. She balanced raising Piper, supporting Lee, and managing daily survival duties. She often had to stay calm in situations where stress was high and time was limited. Her background in nursing helped her stay focused under pressure, while her experience in fishing gave her physical endurance. These skills became essential in a lifestyle where there was no pause button and no outside backup. Even though the workload was heavy, the early signs of strain were not always obvious at first. The homestead required constant cooperation, so both Jane and Lee were focused on getting things done. When people are busy with survival tasks, emotional gaps can be easy to overlook. They were not ignoring problems on purpose. They were simply focused on what needed to be done each day. The shared workload created a sense of teamwork, but it also masked the growing imbalance in emotional presence and support. And as the demands of survival continued to grow, the balance between family life and personal connection would soon be tested in ways they did not fully expect. Private life to public spectacle. When Alaska: The Last Frontier came into the picture, everything around Jane Kilcher and Lee Kilcher changed in a very sudden and unexpected way. What had once been a private, off-grid life built on survival, routine, and isolation was now about to become something visible to the entire world. The Discovery Channel was interested in one main idea: showing real homestead living, where families depend on land, skill, and teamwork instead of modern comfort. The Kilchers already lived that life, so they were a natural fit for the show. At first, the idea may have seemed simple. Cameras would follow daily life and show what it really takes to survive in rural Alaska. But in reality, this brought a major shift. The moment filming began, their private world was no longer fully private. Even though they were still doing the same work, fishing, building, preparing for winter, the presence of cameras changed the feeling of those everyday tasks. Nothing was truly just normal anymore because someone was always watching and recording. This shift from isolation to global visibility was not gradual, it happened quickly. One day, they were living quietly on the homestead. The next, their lives were being shared with viewers around the world. This kind of change affects how people behave, even when they try not to let it. Simple actions like cooking, repairing a structure, or working outdoors became part of a film's story. Over time, awareness of being watched started to influence how natural or relaxed those moments felt. Jane Kilcher stood out to many viewers almost immediately. Her personality felt real and grounded. She did not try to act differently for the camera. Instead, she continued doing her work, speaking honestly, and showing both strength and humor in difficult situations. This made her relatable to fans. Many people saw her as someone who was not performing but simply living her life as it was. Her ability to stay calm under pressure and handle hard conditions helped her become a fan favorite. Viewers respected her resilience and her straightforward way of dealing with challenges. Lee Kilcher, on the other hand, appeared differently on screen. He was more quiet and reserved. While Jane was more open in sharing her thoughts and energy, Lee often kept to himself. He focused more on physical tasks and less on verbal communication or emotional expression in front of the camera. This created a contrast between them that viewers quickly noticed. Over time, his tendency to withdraw and stay silent became more visible, especially compared to Jane's active and engaged presence. Over time, this constant visibility led to emotional exhaustion. There was very little privacy left, even during simple routines. There was also little downtime where they could fully disconnect from being part of a filmed narrative. Everything had the potential to become content. That pressure builds slowly, especially in an environment already filled with physical demands and responsibilities. And as the cameras continued to follow their lives more closely, the gap between public perception and private reality would only become more noticeable moving forward. The silent shift. As time went on after the show gained popularity, a quiet but important shift began to form between Jane Kilcher and Atsley Kilcher. Nothing sudden happened, and there was no single moment that marked a clear break. Instead, things changed slowly, in a way that was easy to miss at first, but became clearer over time. One of the biggest changes was how differently they responded to fame and daily life on camera. Jane became more active and present both in her work and in how she appeared on the show. She handled many responsibilities openly, stayed engaged with filming, and continued to take on the demanding tasks of homestead life. She also remained more visible to viewers, often showing her daily routines, challenges, and interactions with family life. Atsley, on the other hand, began to move in a different direction. Instead of staying in the center of shared activities, he leaned more toward isolation. He spent more time working alone on remote building projects and tasks that kept him away from the main homestead. These projects were still important to the family survival lifestyle, but they required long periods of solitude. Over time, this became his preferred way of operating. As this pattern continued, Jane found herself carrying more of the day-to-day responsibilities. This was not only about physical work, but also about emotional and practical management of the household. She handled tasks related to filming, family care, and homestead duties, often all at the same time. Her role expanded in a way that required constant attention and energy, both on and off camera. Even though they were still part of the same show and the same overall story, their shared screen time slowly became less frequent. They were no longer consistently shown working together or spending extended time side by side. Instead, scenes often focused on them separately, highlighting different parts of their lives rather than a shared routine. This shift was subtle but noticeable to viewers who had followed them from earlier seasons. Fans began to pick up on this change. Many started asking questions online, wondering what had happened to the connection they once saw between them. Comments like, "Where is the connection going?" started appearing more often. People noticed that while both were still active in the same environment, they were not always present together in the way they used to be. This led to growing curiosity and speculation, even without any official explanation. The communication between Jane and Atsley did not appear to break down in a dramatic or public way. There were no major confrontations or visible arguments shown on screen. Instead, what changed was the tone and frequency of interaction. Conversations seemed more focused on tasks and responsibilities rather than emotional connection or shared reflection. Over time, this created a sense of distance that developed quietly. And as this quiet distance continued to grow, life on the homestead was quietly moving toward a turning point neither of them fully expected. The 2015 accident. In August 2015, everything changed for Jane Kilcher and Atsley Kilcher in a way that no one could have fully prepared for. It was not a filmed moment or a planned event for television. It was real, sudden, and life-threatening. While hiking near Otter Cove in Kachemak Bay, Alaska, Atsley suffered a severe fall of nearly 40 feet. The area was remote, rugged, and difficult to access, which made the situation even more dangerous from the start. The injuries he sustained were extremely serious. He suffered a shattered arm, broken shoulder, fractured ankle and hip, multiple broken ribs, and punctured lungs. These were not minor injuries that could be treated with basic care. They required immediate emergency response. A medical evacuation helicopter had to be called in to airlift him from the remote location. From there, he was rushed to a hospital where he was placed under intensive medical care. For Atsley, who had spent much of his life in harsh environments and physical labor, this was a level of trauma that went far beyond anything he had experienced before. His body was severely damaged, and his survival was uncertain in those early moments. The situation was critical, and recovery would take a long and difficult path. For Jane, the accident marked an immediate shift in her entire world. While news of the fall reached the public through updates and media reports, her experience was very different. She was not reading about it. She was living through it in real time. She had to process fear, uncertainty, and responsibility all at once, while also managing the practical needs of daily life. Jane stepped into a caretaker role immediately. She became the emotional anchor for the situation, handling communication, organizing responsibilities at home, and making sure their daughter Piper was safe and supported. At the same time, she had to manage the homestead, which still required daily attention even during crisis. This meant she was balancing emotional stress with constant physical and practical demands. There were two very different realities happening at the same time. On the public side, updates were shared in a controlled and limited way. Fans were told about the accident and received general information about recovery. But behind the scenes, Jane was dealing with fear and uncertainty that could not be fully expressed in public updates. She had to stay composed while managing an overwhelming personal situation. Lee's recovery was long and physically painful. His body needed time to heal from multiple serious injuries, and that process could not be rushed. However, the recovery was not only physical. The psychological impact of the accident also played a major role in what came next. Experiencing a near-fatal fall in such a remote environment left a lasting effect on his sense of safety and stability. Over time, signs of emotional withdrawal began to appear. This did not happen suddenly. It developed gradually as he processed the trauma. He became more quiet and more distant, often choosing solitude over shared space. This kind of response is common after severe physical trauma, especially when the experience involves fear, pain, and loss of control. As he returned home, the emotional distance became more noticeable. While he was physically present again, he was not fully re-engaging in the same way as before. He began spending more time away from the main living area, often focusing on personal projects that allowed him to work alone. This included building and spending time in remote cabin spaces away from the homestead. These solitary projects were not just hobbies. They became part of his coping process. The quiet and isolation provided a sense of control and space to process what he had gone through. However, this also meant that the emotional gap between him and Jane continued to grow. Even though there was no open conflict, there was less shared daily interaction. Jane, meanwhile, continued to hold the homestead and family life together. She remained active in daily responsibilities, parenting, and managing the ongoing demands of their environment. While she supported Lee through recovery, she also carried the weight of maintaining stability at home. And as recovery continued in different forms for each of them, the distance created by that moment began to shape everything that came next, together but apart. After the physical recovery from the 2015 accident, life on the Kilcher homestead slowly settled back into routine. On the surface, things looked stable again. Lee Kilcher had healed enough to return to daily life, and the immediate crisis was over. But beneath that surface, something important was no longer the same. The emotional reconnection that usually follows a shared trauma did not fully happen in their case. Instead of bringing them closer, the experience seemed to deepen an existing distance. Lee began spending more time away from the main homestead. These absences were not sudden or dramatic. They were gradual and often explained as work, building projects, or time needed for focus. However, over time, the pattern became clear. He was choosing more time alone, often in remote areas where he could work independently and avoid the constant presence of others. Jane, on the other hand, remained deeply involved in the daily structure of life. She continued managing the household, raising their daughter Piper, and taking on the responsibilities connected to filming for Alaska, The Last Frontier. Her days were full, often starting early and ending late, with little room for rest. She handled both physical tasks and emotional responsibilities, making sure everything at home continued to function smoothly. As this pattern continued, emotional disconnection began to show more clearly. Fans who had followed the show for years started noticing changes in how Jane and Lee appeared together. There were fewer shared moments on screen, fewer conversations that showed emotional closeness, and less visible teamwork between them. While nothing was officially addressed, the shift was noticeable to those watching closely. Behind the scenes, communication between them appeared to become more practical than personal. Conversations focused on daily needs, work tasks, and family responsibilities. The emotional layer of communication, such as sharing feelings, concerns, or personal thoughts, seemed reduced. This kind of shift can happen slowly in long relationships, especially when life is demanding and time together becomes limited. Jane's role during this time was marked by steady endurance. She continued to show up for her responsibilities without drawing attention to the emotional strain she may have been carrying. She managed the household, supported her daughter, and kept up with filming demands, all while maintaining a sense of stability in daily life. Lee's presence, however, became more inconsistent, both physically and emotionally. The relationship slowly shifted from what once felt like a team effort to something more individual. Instead of two people actively working together in the same rhythm, it became two separate routines happening within the same environment. Each person was still contributing to the homestead and family life, but not always in a shared or connected way. And as this quiet separation became part of everyday life, the changes that followed would eventually become impossible to ignore. The final years. In the final years before their separation, the relationship between Jane Kilcher and Lee Kilcher entered a quiet but steady decline. There was no single public event that marked the end of their connection. Instead, it was a slow shift that became more noticeable over time, especially to those who had followed their lives through Alaska. The last frontier. What once felt coordinated and shared no longer appeared the same, either on screen or in daily life. One of the clearest changes was that their lives were no longer synchronized in any meaningful way. Even when they were part of the same environment, they were no longer consistently seen working together or sharing the same focus. Their appearances on Alaska, the last frontier, became more separate, with fewer moments that showed them operating as a connected unit. Instead, their scenes often highlighted individual tasks rather than shared efforts. Jane gradually took full control of most daily operations at home. This included managing household responsibilities, handling parenting duties, and maintaining the overall structure of life on the homestead. She became the central point for keeping everything running smoothly. Her role expanded not because of a formal decision, but because day-to-day life naturally placed more responsibility on her shoulders over time. At the same time, her daughter Piper was growing older and becoming more independent. As Piper reached her teenage years and later young adulthood, she required less day-to-day care. This changed the dynamic at home, as Jane was no longer managing the same level of constant childcare, but she was still deeply involved in supporting her daughter emotionally and practically. Etienne, Lee's son, also moved out during this period. His departure further reduced the sense of a shared family household. With both children becoming independent and less present at home, the structure of the family naturally shifted. The homestead no longer had the same full household energy it once did, which changed the rhythm of daily life for both Jane and Lee. Lee continued to spend significant time in isolation. His preference for working alone and staying in remote areas remained consistent. While this lifestyle suited his personal habits and projects, it also reinforced the emotional distance between him and Jane. The more time he spent away from the main living space, the less opportunity there was for shared daily interaction or emotional connection. During this same period, fans began noticing changes in Jane's social media presence. Her posts became less personal and more reserved. She still shared aspects of her life, but the tone shifted. There were fewer emotional reflections or family-centered updates, and more focus on practical or general content. This change stood out to longtime followers who were used to seeing more warmth and storytelling in her earlier posts. And as silence replaced connection, the final stage of their relationship quietly began to take shape in ways that could no longer be ignored. The announcement. In 2023, the long-running relationship between Jane Kilcher and Lee Kilcher reached its final public chapter with a quiet divorce announcement. There was no major media event, no press tour, and no dramatic reveal. Instead, the confirmation came in a simple and understated way, reflecting the same private tone that had surrounded much of their personal struggles in the years leading up to it. Jane's statement stood out not for what it included, but for what it did not. She did not use strong language, and she did not turn the moment into a public conflict. Instead, her words reflected acceptance. She acknowledged the situation directly, but without anger or blame. It was clear that this was not meant to start a public discussion or invite controversy. It was a statement meant to confirm reality and then move forward. There were no public accusations from either side. No scandal framing appeared in her message, and no detailed explanation was given about what specifically led to the end of the marriage. This absence of detail was intentional and consistent with how Jane had handled private matters throughout her time in the public eye. She had always kept personal struggles out of public debate, and this situation followed the same pattern. For many viewers, the relationship had long been defined more by endurance than by visible happiness. Over the years, fans had seen signs of distance, reduced shared appearances, and emotional separation. Because of this, the announcement did not come as a shock to many. Instead, it confirmed what had already been quietly observed and discussed among longtime followers of Alaska: the last frontier. The public reaction was a mix of understanding and reflection. Many fans expressed sympathy for Jane, recognizing the years of effort and emotional strength she had shown. Others pointed back to earlier seasons and moments where they believed the shift in the relationship had already begun. But overall, the response leaned more toward acceptance than surprise because the signs had been present for a long time. Throughout this period, Jane continued to handle public attention with a steady sense of dignity. She did not engage in arguments online or respond to speculation in a defensive way. Instead, she maintained her focus on her life and responsibilities. This approach reinforced how she had consistently chosen to deal with personal matters, keeping control over what she shared and what she kept private. If you followed this story all the way through, let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories.